The final stage setting for the Apology of Socrates is a little background for our good dead friend, Plato. Now, the origin story of Plato is tied into the death of Socrates. So, Socrates was Plato's mentor, and in the Phaedo, Plato had a quote about Socrates which says, "Such was the end of our friend, who was, I think, of all men of our time, the best, the wisest, and the most just." Plato wondered why a society could not tolerate the existence of Socrates, and what sort of society would be needed to allow wisdom to prevail and to have a society that would not kill good people. And that was his driving motivation, kind of his, Batman origin story. A little more background for him. He was born around 428 or 427 BC into an aristocratic family, so very well off. He was trained to be a political leader, traveled quite a bit, perhaps even to Egypt, and he went to Syracuse in what is now Italy in 388. One of his claims to fame is, of course, founding the Academy. If you ever wondered why the Academy is called the Academy and why academics is called academics, here's the answer. So first, Plato's Academy, and so people just kept copying that. So why was the original Academy called the Academy? Well, at least according to the story, the Academy, the school, was located in a grove dedicated to the hero Academus. And so if it had been a hero with a different name, say Bobademus, we'd be doing Bobademics at the Bobatomy. So just really chance. Now, like many philosophers who do, political and social philosophy and ethics, he dreamed of having his views put into practice. And in 368 and 361, he attempted to philosophize the ruler of Syracuse, a fellow named Dionysius the Younger. This went very, very badly, and he had to flee with his life, barely escaping in 361. He ended up dying around 348 or 347 BC, and is, of course, still dead today. Now, in addition to the Academy, which gives us the term academics, he is also well known for having a comprehensive philosophy. He was mainly focused on ethical theory, again, trying to build a society that does not kill good people. And to achieve this, he believed he had to do all the rest of philosophy. So, in order to ensure the development of this ideal society, perhaps someday, he believed that we had to go look at metaphysics to get the answer to these ethical and political problems. And he realized that to make progress in metaphysics, you would need a theory of knowledge. So sort of his end game was ethical theory, a good society that doesn't kill good people. And he realized that he needed ethics and political philosophy to do that, and he needed metaphysics to do ethical political philosophy, and he needed metaphysics to do, or rather epistemology to do metaphysics. So one reason why he was doing all that stuff. And then of course he died, and he's still dead today. He wrote a multitude of dialogues, which you can still read now. We now head into the actual apology. Now the trial opens in the city of Athens, and the setup is basically this. So Socrates is among his fellow citizens, and what happens is he gets to defend himself. And the reason why they call it apology is not because he's saying that he's sorry. It comes from the older meaning of the term apologia, which is defense. So it's not him saying, gosh, I'm so sorry, as we'll see. Rather, it's his attempt to defend himself. And so the way it worked was the accuser and the accused would speak before the citizens of Athens, the male property owners, free citizens, and make their case. And then they would put it to a vote. So it's a form of trial by jury. The next stage was after the vote was taken as to whether the person should be found, guilty and punished or not, is the decision of the punishment. And both sides would have their chance to make their case, and then that would be voted on as well. So we see essentially a trial by jury with voting. So how does the trial open? Well, the trial opens with charges against Socrates. And some of these will seem rather strange. There are the various, what can be considered the old charges, that Socrates is an evildoer, a curious person, that he searches into things under the earth and in heaven, and makes the worse appear the better cause, and teaches that stuff to others. And these were kind of generic charges against any philosopher. Socrates also notes that Aristophanes wrote a sarcastic play called The Clouds, in which he is mocked by Aristophanes. Socrates was also accused, oddly enough, of being a paid teacher. So those are sort of the opening charges. Now, Socrates attempts to show what might be the real reason why he's on trial. What we mentioned before we talked about the reason was this. His friend, Chaerephon, went to the oracle of Delphi to ask if anyone was wiser than Socrates. And the oracle replied back, "There is no man wiser." Socrates, knowing that he has no wisdom, wondered what the oracle, or rather the god speaking to the oracle, meant. And as we discussed earlier, Socrates came up with a test. If he could find a wiser person, he could refute the gods. So he begins his search with the politicians. They speak often of how, smart they are, how virtuous they are, how wise and great they are. And so he went to them with high hopes. And he went to the politician with the greatest reputation for wisdom and revealed that this politician was not wise. And Socrates concluded that though he knows nothing, he's still better off than that politician. The politician knows nothing but thinks that he knows. And Socrates neither knows nor thinks that he knows. And he found that the politicians that were the most respected, held the highest office, were the most foolish, and those far less esteemed were wiser and better. So the politicians proved to be a terrible disappointment for him. Then he turned to the poets. As you might recall from the earlier background for Western philosophy, the ancient Greek poets were not just, presenting verses about stuff. They also purported to be able to teach people, the sciences and ethics and how to live their lives, etc. And he engaged the poets. There is a dialogue, the Ion, devoted to this entire discussion, in which Socrates engages Ion in a discussion, and of course, since Plato is writing it, defeats him. He concludes from this discussion that poets do not do their poems on the basis of wisdom. Rather, they're inspired by the gods. They are like diviners, like prophets, who say many fine things without any understanding that the gods speak through them. And their poetry leads them to make the mistake of thinking they are wise, but they are not. They are merely a vessel of wisdom. So he concludes, perhaps somewhat arrogantly, that he was superior to them because he knew nothing, but they knew nothing and thought they knew. He then heads to consider the artisans, the craftspeople, and he did find that they knew many things he didn't, their crafts, their skills, and in this they were wiser than him. But he found that even the good artisans, the skilled craftspeople, made the same mistake as the poets and the politicians. Because they were good at their jobs, they thought they knew all sorts of things, and this defect overshadowed their wisdom. And he concluded that he would rather have neither their knowledge nor their ignorance. So then, what is wisdom going to be for Socrates? Well, we've already seen this. He claims that he is called wise by others, since his listeners imagine he has the wisdom he finds wanting in others. And he says, only the gods are wise, and the god's answer, the oracle's answer to the question, is to show that the wisdom of people is worth little or nothing, that the wisest know their wisdom is worth nothing. And so Socrates tested the wisdom of all who claimed to be wise, and if someone turned out not to be wise, then, in vindication of the oracle, Socrates exposes their lack of wisdom. He then turns to considering the charges leveled against him. And if you're familiar with the legal system, these are not ones you typically would see presented in a court today. They're not charges like burglary or, embezzlement, etc., or perjury. So what are the charges? Well, what leads Socrates into trouble is his relation with the youth of Athens. And the problem is this. The youth apparently imitated Socrates. He was what we would call today an influencer. And they would follow Socrates' guidance and question the politicians, the artisans, etc. And they would find, like Socrates, that most people who think they know little or nothing. And the people who, fell afoul of the examination of the youth questioning them, they're mad at Socrates. They're not mad at themselves for not knowing. So their response, at least according to Socrates, is to accuse him, Socrates, of being a villainous misleader of the youth. Now, according to him, if his accusers are asked what is it, this evil that he does or teaches, they don't know. They cannot tell. And to avoid seeming to be at a loss, seeming to be even more foolish, they repeat the charges leveled against all philosophers, such as teaching about things up in the clouds and under the earth, having no gods, making the worse appear the better cause. They do not like to confess that their pretense of knowledge has been detected. Next, we'll move on to looking at the accusers of Socrates, and in more details, the charges against him.